So welcome to another episode of the Heatio Home Energy Show. I want you to take a minute and imagine having all the questions that you have around renewable energy and energy saving in your homes being answered by two of the young entrepreneurs, leading experts in this industry.
Cool. I'm looking forward to
When they come in, I was going to say, unfortunately, they weren't available today. So what we do have is Managing Director of Freedom Heat Pumps, a UK distributor of heat pump systems, Chris Higgs, and a business partner and commercial director for Heatio, Thomas Farquhar. So welcome to the show, gents.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it.
And you both started out in heat pumps at exactly the same time, pretty much, wasn't it? You both started out life at ICS heat pumps.
No, I was definitely before.
Yeah, you were about a year before, weren't you? I
Yeah.
think you were about a year before. Oh, yeah, quick shout out to Gary B. I was just said that before now.
Oh, the god of heat pumps, Gary Broadbent.
Yeah. Gary B saw something in me that very few other people did.
No. He saw something in me and then asked me if I knew anyone.
Yeah.
And then we found you.
Well, who hired you? Were you Chris's boss or?
Well, I mean, there weren't any official lines.
Not at all. No, I think we only worked together for about a month.
Mentor.
Mentor. Yeah, I think we worked together for about a month, and then and then obviously you went across and joined Simon, and then I took over from where you left off.
A very strong foundation. Literally just steer the ship at that point.
But that was ICS heat pumps.
It was ICS.
And what was I'm trying to remember was it the Bran that they did? It was
the DeLonghi. Yeah, there was the Bran. I never sold a Bran. Yeah, the Elliwell controller scared
this
me.
time.
But I did this time.
But there was about 3,000 parameters that you had to set in that thing to make it work.
Yeah, it was interesting. That and the DHW Twin, where the DHW Twin was definitely ahead of its time. But my favourite one was the AWHT. Like R407C, I can hear the refrigeration engineers, R407C is horrible. But no, we had a really, really good unit, 65-degree unit. It was like it was the OG.
It was. I remember standing. It was like temperature. It was like minus 18. It was like 2009, 2010. It was an incredibly cold winter. We were stood next to one in snow, and it was like minus 18. It was still pumping out 65.
But this was manufactured by DeLonghi.
Yeah.
Because that's what I meant. Because I think how I kind of got to know you guys then, I was installing heat pump systems. I was buying off you, and this DeLonghi heat pump came along, and then it was like, they make coffee machines. They don't make heat pump systems.
That was part of my pitch. That was the way in the door.
Yeah,
Do you like coffee? We're in.
I always liked it where it was, DeLonghi's a brand synonymous with making stuff warm. Do you know what I mean? So coffee machines, toasters, heat pumps.
It's a strange seller. If you're going, do you want, so just like a coffee machine? Yeah, don't mind. Whilst you're already thinking about something warm, how would you like your house to be warm?
And you go, well, yes.
I didn't teach him that one. That was all on his own. Not one I'd condone.
I would like that. Very much. I think we worked together for a month or so. Obviously, you went across to Easy MCS. I think I was with the guys for a couple of years after that, and then migrated on to Solfex. So I was at Solfex for 4 years, I think I was with Solfex.
And was that because was Solfex became part of Travis Perkins group, didn't they? But were they part of Travis Perkins when you started?
No, I came into Solfex in 2012, and I think they were just at the end of the acquisition phase, but I knew nothing about it. And then moved, and in 2013, that's when they sort of completed that. So quite quickly, I was part of this, much bigger business. And I learned a huge amount from Solfex. I mean, the solar PV industry was so much more mature than the heat pump industry was at the time. So there's so much stuff that we could learn from it. And also being part of this much bigger organisation like Travis Perkins, it gave us loads of access to like City Plumbing and PTS, and it really helped me understand like the merchant model as well. Because I still believe, merchants are sort of key to helping continue grow this industry.
Absolutely.
As well as direct to installer and the way that we've been operating for the past sort of 13 years already.
That was I think a hugely significant moment in the growth of renewables in the UK, because to see so Solflex, the way they grew that business, it was Danny and Stu.
Danny and Stu.
Danny was the one who we had some dealings with from an installation perspective, obviously hugely technically knowledgeable. And they obviously grew during the solar PV boom. But I remember them bringing in some really kind of, even just their solar thermal systems, really, really class bits of kit.
Yeah.
And then obviously to see them getting acquired by TP, the real show of, this is the industry going in a particular direction. And you did your 4 years there.
Yeah.
And then was it straight from there into Freedom?
Yeah. So I was buying equipment from Graham over at Freedom when I was at Solflex. We were taking the Samsung equipment and then redistributing it as a second line, distributor. Just picking up actually the important point that I wanted to mention about obviously Danny and Stu, that what made their business so successful was their passion around solar thermal and PV. So whilst heat pumps was like a new thing for them that, they brought me in to sort of steer the ship on, you could tell that every product that they brought in, they wanted to make sure that it was the best. And I really took a lot of that away with me. So when I sort of moved from ICS to Solflex, I had a huge amount of passion for the equipment anyway, but then seeing like a different technology and seeing someone so passionate about that as well, you go, oh, actually, this is a really good way to sell. You can just be really passionate about a piece of kit and just continue to sell. It doesn't need to be like a sort of quote unquote traditional sales thing where you're sort of like, well, I don't really believe in it, but do you want to buy it kind of thing.
But they invested in it. The setup they had for distribution as well was absolutely class. I mean, we didn't do a huge amount of solar PV, but me and Tom under the banner of kind of Easy MCS were working with a lot of PV installers, and we were seeing the quality of what they were distributing. And then I did a few installations with their solar thermal systems, and the way that package just turned up, the pre-insulated hoses, they were one of the first to start doing that kind of way. It just made life so easy, and it wasn't ridiculous prices as well. It was, so no, they're class guys, and Danny's still involved now. From what I'd certainly see. We did some deals with Terry Townsend.
Yeah.
And I think there was, when it came to like the system spec and the design, we did some stuff with Danny. So I think he's still there at Solflex.
But the packs that obviously you mentioned there before about everything sort of fitting together really neatly, the packs that Solflex did, that really formed the foundation of what we ended up doing at Freedom.
Yeah.
So just sort of moving forward a little bit, when I came, so I was buying equipment from Graham. I've had a really good relationship with the guys over at Freedom, and then we sort of just decided one day, well, wouldn't it be interesting if we joined, my sort of sales and commercial focus with their really strong technical foundation, and see where we can take it. And my heart still is and was back then, 100% into heat pumps, and it was still a very immature market, and no one really knew where it was going to go. So I was sort of putting all my eggs in one basket really, and I justified it to myself saying that, look, I've got two choices here. I can stay with a sort of multi-technology company and see what happens, and maybe I'll have a job for life, and I can end up, if heat pumps don't work, I can take my sort of technical understanding and move to a different product and sort of move around that way. But I thought, if the heat pump industry sort of failed at that point, I'd only really have myself to blame, because I wouldn't have made that commitment to the industry. So that's a big reason that I jumped across to Freedom. And and we started integrating a lot of stuff that I learned from Solflex, things like the packs we brought on, mainly, and similar to the way that Solflex operated, we weren't looking to make huge margins on like 2-port valves and flexi hoses. It was stuff that was difficult for an installer to find off the shelf from a merchant, a traditional sort of plumber's merchant, but stuff that was really important to get a successful installation. So we just became that sort of one-stop shop for installers. We continue to grow from. So when did I come in? I came in 2016. Became a director a couple of years later, and then we continued to grow the business. Graham sort of took a step back in 2020. Really good time for me to take over during, I think, Brexit, first COVID. We had, what else did we have? We did have Boris Johnson's green 10-point green plan, or green 10-point plan. And that was a really, really good boost for the for the industry in terms of promotion about heat pumps and all that good stuff. But yeah, the first few months were definitely challenging for sure.
The baptism of fire coming in. I'm just going to hand you this
pandemic. Exiting a fairly big institution.
I can imagine Graham sat across the bar going, numbers aren't as good as when I was in charge.
Pretty sure that's also when Donald Trump was elected. So
it was when Donald Trump was elected.
Quite a lot going on.
Yeah, there was quite a lot going on. So, but it was, it sort of took over as managing director. Graham sort of took a step back to technical director. And we just continued pushing the business forward. Double turnover in the first year, so back end of 2021. And then I think we were 70% up again in back end of 2022.
Do you think those are coincidences or because of what you did?
I'd like to say there was a lot of moving parts that came together. But I think it's very difficult for me not to be humble and go, well, no, it was all me. Look, exactly at the day that I took over, everything went amazing. But no, there was a lot of stuff that came together. There was a lot more focus on the industry, regardless of, I'm not a particularly political person, but Boris Johnson loves a heat pump, and he was really pushing that. That sort of heat pump agenda and the green agenda, and that really promoted the industry and helped sort of supercharge it a bit towards the end of the renewable heat incentive. So coming into March last year, obviously the industry was crazy. It was just going, really, really on a sort of steep upward trajectory. Boiler upgrade scheme comes out, and it did feel like a bit of a reset. So as we come out of the RHI, obviously boiler upgrade scheme being a very different sort of funding mechanism to the RHI. So we're definitely up on where we were last year, but I think the boiler upgrade scheme really there was a much bigger dip than I think a lot of people within the industry expected.
Yeah, I think that transition was pretty huge, and the whole audience changed in it. The architecture types of properties that were having heat pumps fitted, the types of audience that were going for them. So it's definitely a journey from the days at ICS to managing director now. Would I be right in saying in terms of heat pump distribution? Got to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, heat pump distributor in the UK.
I think possibly the biggest in the world. I think it's fair to say.
Again, another coincidence.
No, joking aside.
They landed on your feet, didn't you?
We just with a better heat pumps. We've always strived to be, and market intel is very difficult around this industry. We've only really got the MCS data dashboard to sort of compare ourselves against. We maintain a solid market share. But for us, growth is secondary to doing a good job. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's always the case of being the best heat pump distributor and doing as much as we possibly can do to make sure that installers are looked after. We've always taken that approach of almost being an extension to the installer's business. So things, they can just concentrate on installing, and we'll spec up the equipment, we'll do the heat loss calculations, all the kind of stuff that would mean that they'd have to do it in the evening or they'd have to come off site to be able to do it. So a lot of our best relationships and longer standing customers have been a partnership between two companies, really.
It's as huge. Opposed to, yeah. That's I think and it was one of the reasons why we wanted to get you on today and Tom as well. And I think the combined experience and those support services that have been developed over time to ultimately help installers get into the industry. So for you, Tom, I'm going to do it just as you're about to take a drink of water.
It's all right.
So Chris has talked about his rise and his journey. So from your days starting out at ICS selling heat pumps, I have a very particular memory of working with you. And I was on
And I presume you're going to share it. And I presume it'll be embarrassing.
No, actually, it isn't. And I think it's a sign of the times of how the industry's changed. So we were doing the installation company that I was working for at the time. We were doing an install for a DIY SOS project under it was one of their first big build projects. And during the commissioning and the setup of the heat pump system, there was we're not good. Yeah, so the lid was off the heat pump, and we were setting up all the controls and everything with it and checking everything on it. But the lid was off the bran and the fan was spinning, And one of the guys on site wanted to check how fast it was spinning by putting his finger inside. And this was they'd done an extension on this big build, and they just rendered the whole thing white. And those builds, they go up super quick anyway. So the render was still all wet. This guy's fingertip came off. Not only did we have blood all up the wall, but we had obviously completely set the fan out on the heat pump, and it was going into fault.
See, I'm not a ventilation engineer, as many people may not know. But I don't think that's a recognised way of testing fan speed.
I've not heard of it.
I would say
it's UCAS.
I don't think it's. I would say it's not even necessarily just an industry thing. I would recommend nobody does that.
I would definitely recommend anything where you have to take a cover off and put
a safety cover,
and
a grill.
And put just is he all right? I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know whether it grew back, but he, as far as I'm aware, I spoke to him fairly recently, and his hand still. Whereas he lost the tip of his finger,
right?
But I mean, it's a relatively useless part.
I think it's important because some of the audience members may be envisaging, full arm.
Exactly.
There was a lot of blood.
There was a lot of blood, and obviously on a build like that, when you're trying to do things relatively quickly, the fact that the heat pump wasn't working, at that stage in the build is quite critical.
Yep.
So I rang up Tom, explained the situation. It's obviously not the most unique situation, and Tom then jumps in a car from Blackpool and drives to Anglesey with.
Well, first of all, I had to jump in my car, which was the old Vauxhall Astra, the square one, and drive to the warehouse. And on my own, get a small heat pump, which I think was about 120 kilos, into the boot of my car. Because there were no deliveries. I think it was a Sunday.
Yeah.
And get it into the boot of my car and then drive to Anglesey.
Bear in mind, so we had the whole DIY SOS crew were there. There is a clip somewhere of me being, I can't remember the guy, the Irish builder that's on there.
Nick Knowles?
Nick Knowles was the main presenter, but the Irish builder who did kind of project manage the jobs.
I can't think of it.
So there's actually a clip of him interviewing me, talking about how amazing this heat pump is. That was literally about 30 seconds after this kid's taken his finger off. So Tom said, I ring Tom up on a Sunday or whatever it was. Right, we got this thing. We got to hand over this house tomorrow. This has happened. And Tom drives this, somehow gets a 5 kilowatt Brown or whatever into the back of his Vauxhall Astra, drives it over to Anglesey, hands it over to me. We swap the unit out. We get it all working.
I get the bloodied one back in the car.
Yeah, take it back.
They'd not even cleaned it.
No. It was a busy job.
Hatchback Astra, was it?
No. Maybe it was the Vectra. No, it wasn't.
I just got memories of it turning up and the boot still being open and just string wrapped around it or something. But that made me realise at that time, I was like, I need to work with this guy. This guy is dedicated to the cause. And at that time, I'd just started a company called Easy MCS, which was
Go MCS.
Oh, sorry, I called it Go MCS, and I basically gone through the process, as we're going to touch on today, of what an installer has to go through to get MCS accredited, and all the paperwork and the process and everything you have to do around that. And it took me about 6 months to get through this journey. But I had this great big document, this folder of all this procedures and forms and everything that I had to go through. And I thought, well, I can make some money back on the 6 months I've just spent doing this by selling that to some of my friends down the pub who were looking at getting into renewables. And Tom came down and saw my website called Go MCS. And quickly told me
suggested there was a better way of doing it.
Yeah, I can imagine it was subtly suggested.
Yeah. But it turned out what I didn't know at the time was Tom was some kind of digital marketing guru. So from whilst he's out selling heat pumps to people, he's also promoting this web. He's built a new website for us called the Business Easy MCS. At the time, I was like, look, anything that comes through, we'll just split it 50-50. So yeah, then Tom set up a digital marketing campaign. And then now trying to do installations whilst the phone's ringing off the hook for people wanting easy MCS quality management systems. My dad came on board to actually start then producing the management systems and doing all that side of things. And then, I eventually managed to tempt Tom away from Gary Broadbent and ICS. And so
the rest is history.
Yeah.
Well,
oh, sorry, you want to carry
sorry, the whole thing is your journey. We can't just go, the rest is history.
I don't remember a lot of tears on you leaving.
Huh?
I don't remember a lot of tears.
I think you were off sick again.
Again.
Wow. So
So what was your journey then from that day, from coming into? Remember you coming into Easy MCS and the first day you started there. So from there to now, summarise it. We don't need it day by day, but
well, I suppose we went from it being me and your dad, with me cold calling and ringing every installer I knew and trying to grow it from there to, by the end, I think we had 20, 22 members of staff. We had a training centre. We had installers that relied on us for support and calculation software and design software. And it evolved into not just being about, procedures and management systems, but into we were the sort of second part of an installer's business where we were helping them maintain everything so that they could focus on what they do best, which is quality installations and making sure we'd covered everything else. So we were a fairly integral part of quite a lot of installation businesses.
That was that, and that journey. That's an installer that was, or an organisation that decided that they wanted to get into the renewable energy industry. They hit the door and they start on that journey, and they get faced with all these requirements. And for those viewers that don't know, just explain, what was it that Easy MCS did?
Well, to become an MCS installer, you had to not only be able to do quality installations, but you also had to have a business that followed quality management, so procedures and documentation that essentially protect. The idea was that it would protect consumers. So things like everything from how you dealt with health and safety to complaints or the quoting process, cooling off periods, everything that a good business should do. But this was about getting it into a way that could be assessed and checked by an independent auditor, with the idea being that with an industry that at the time was very reliant on subsidies and government incentives, they had to make sure that they restricted the ability for cowboys to operate. And I think essentially it did do that. It meant that if you wanted to come in with the sole purpose of operating unscrupulously, there was a big disincentive to do that, because you had to go through these different hoops. You had to have processes in place. You had to have people coming in and checking on you. So it meant that installers that did want to do it were sense checked. And to my knowledge, there was very little of that sort of operation, i.e. people getting in for the wrong reasons, because there were barriers in the way.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna touch on a few areas around that and what those barriers are potentially that are getting in the way of installers getting in, and how that quality management system part plays in the journey for installers. So Easy MCS, I think by 2014, 2015, we'd grown that to a support service that was working with over 40% of all MCS installers. So we'd helped a lot of installers on that journey into the renewable energy industry. We'd also, as you say, built calculation tools and software tools which aided the process. So everything to try and make that journey as easy as possible. Yeah. We actually we recognized that business had kind of grown probably far quicker and bigger than we had anticipated when we started out, and we looked for a strategic home for it to go on to, and that was found in what's known now as Evergreen Energy, and Easy MCS still operates today. It's actually Libby Jones, who was one of our first employees, is the MD over at the head of Easy MCS and looking after all that side. James Allison, who was probably our second employee, is still there, and I think Tamara Bainbridge as well is still there.
Yeah,
as one of the
few of the old guard.
Yeah. So they were talking about a business that was formed in 2010 to support installers in that transition. And we're now on a podcast in 2023, and we're still talking about the topic of today's show, the challenges that installers face in that way through. So what happened? We exited the business or sold the business into
so after we merged with Evergreen, then we obviously went over and supported that business and carried on growing it and supported the other divisions in the group. And then since then, it's been sort of.
Hang on, you took a bit of time out.
Okay, well, yeah. So there's a slight gap where I left Evergreen and went on and did some other things and tried a few other ideas outside.
Anything in particular?
No, outside of the sector. And then I came back and we grew it. I mean, the Evergreen business is pretty strong, pretty big, one of the biggest installers around. I think they've just started branching out into solar as well. But in terms of heat pumps, they were absolutely flying.
Yeah. And then we fast forward to April 2022, and me and you decided to go back into business again under Heatio.
Round two.
Do you want to just talk a little bit around what Heatio is doing and how that can aid installers in the journey as well?
I mean, I think the ultimate aim initially for Heatio was that we wanted to unlock some of the other barriers around deployment of renewables. Initially, we were focusing on heat pumps, but wider than that, removing the main things that were stopping consumers engaging. So things like capital cost. We wanted to look into innovative finance and how you could come up with new ways of allowing consumers to access the technology without capital cost being a barrier. But also the process for consumers finding out what technologies they wanted or needed, and where they could start on the energy saving journey. So at the moment, if you're an average homeowner and you want to save on your energy bills, the experience I've had is that is not a straightforward journey. You don't know necessarily where to turn and how to start that process. And if you do, it usually ends up with an EPC. And at the moment, I think 3/4, slightly more, 80% of EPCs are done for house moves. They're not done because people are knocking on the door saying, I want an energy assessment because I want to save energy. But EPCs are based on someone going into the house and doing a visual inspection. It's what they can see in front of them, no more. And what we wanted to do was take an approach that looked at what was actually going on in the house, what the homeowner was doing, and take a data-driven approach to getting towards what they needed to do to, we'll call it get to net zero, but to get to a point of the best possible point they could be at from a carbon point of view and energy savings, but taking it from what's actually happening in real life as opposed to what a surveyor says on an estimate.
Now, and in terms of the approach that we're taking to that, so the idea is to be able to develop a solution that monitors the home and its performance, a home energy management system itself. It will give the recommendations to the customers to the journey they need to go on, based on real life data, not necessarily the assumed data that you get from an EPC. And then as those customers make those improvements, some of them might be relatively low cost, or some of them could be high cost in a PV installation or heat pump installation. Then we link into that those innovative finance solutions. And it's been in the press quite recently around the Green Homes Finance Accelerator. So we actually, as Heatio, were involved in 2 consortiums under the Finance Accelerator. Do you want to touch on them a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we did. So we put 2 bids in with what was BAYS. I think they're now DESNES. Yeah. Is that what we're calling it? So under BAYS, we put 2 bids in. One was alongside E.ON, who we've worked with before, and that was to look at deploying energy as a service, which essentially is putting technologies into a home, so things like solar, batteries, heat pump, with the idea of the homeowner then enters into an agreement with you as the generator using the technology you fitted to reduce their energy bills significantly. So they lower their energy bills, but it's as a direct result of fitting technology. So you remove all the capital cost impact, fit all the technology, and the homeowner reduces the bills. So,
and this is the energy as a service and heat as a service proposition. So this is you pay a fixed monthly fee, and for that you not only receive the benefits of the technologies, but you also get the savings as well.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and it's fully supported, looked after by an organisation like Heatio, where everything, the technology, the maintenance, the replacements over that 20-year period, everything is looked after for you.
Yeah, and you just get the benefit of overall you saving every single month. That's the idea. So it's already been done in different countries around the world, but it's not yet been done in the UK. So that's the challenge we're trying to address with E.ON, is how we deploy energy as a service and how we get that into homes. But it's primarily for people that don't want to or can't make that capital investment. So if you've got the money to invest in solar panels, then the best course of action is to put the money into the solar panels and get all the benefits. But if you haven't, then this is a way of unlocking energy savings by us taking on the capital cost. And then the other bid is looking at a long-term green mortgage. So that's with an organisation called Perenna, who are a big bank. What we're looking at with them is driving homeowner uptake of a long-term mortgage that gives a green incentive. So the idea would be that based on the system we install, which makes recommendations, if you then take the recommendations that we've said, so say it recommends a heat pump and solar panels, and you then fit those, the incentive is that you'll get a reduction in the interest rate on your mortgage, which with the way mortgages are going at the moment is quite aptly timed. But But the idea is, again, to give people a reason to install energy efficiency products and renewables over and above the obvious ones. It's another reason, i.e. take out a mortgage. If you do anything that we tell you to that's going to save you energy, to save on your bills, we'll also discount your entire mortgage for you. So it's quite revolutionary.
Yeah, it's a good thing to have on the show, I think, between the solutions that Freedom and Chris are developing for that installer-based market and the consumer. If you bring those two solutions together, I think that's where we're going to start to see some change. We've got to make it simpler. We've got to make the process easier. But, I mean, so those two journeys leading to where we are today, how long is that then? 15 years in the...
Yeah. 2008, about that.
Yeah. No, 2010, so I'm 13 years in,
Yeah.
I think my lad was born a year before I got in, so yeah, he's like a heat pump baby. I think
Not even there were baby boomers and now there's heat pump babies.
Heat pump babies, yeah.
I think we're the definition of next generation, and then to your sort of old guard, classic.
See, I would say because the market
classic really... Coke Zero.
No, I would have said no, I'm Diet Coke. I would have said that.
Now you Diet Coke.
You know, like back in the day, like the market hadn't really kicked off. You know, I think, when did MCS start recording? I think that was 2009. Mm-hmm. So really, 2009, 2010 was almost the dawn of heat pumpery. It was like
heat pumpery. I don't think that's a phrase.
I think it can be.
Well, you can coin it.
If it's on a podcast, it's a phrase.
Put a hashtag in front of it.
Yeah, you certainly can do. So I think anyone that was around sort of 2009, 2010, I think that's the current generation, because there's a lot of people that were in this before. I think we forget that there was a lot of people installing heat pumps, you know, back in the 70s and 80s. You know, nowhere near what they're doing now, but, you know, ground source units that they cobbled together in a shed kind of thing. And
Sling keys. Sling keys.
Well, that's where I started out. I was doing commercial grade ground source for a company called Water Furnace at the time. So it was, you know, large scale working on sites for Water Furnace. Large scale ground source in schools, and that must have been 2005 maybe. 2002 when I started. When I did my apprenticeship, I went straight into heat pumps, so I never touched a fossil fuel system. So they say that it's been growing. It's just feels incredibly slow. Yeah, the speed, the time it's taken to get to where we are today. But that's why I thought it was really important to get you guys on to the show, because I think to a lot of people, when they're hearing about whether it's heat pumps, solar, or just energy improvements in general, a lot of people think this is a new thing because we've got this energy crisis going on right now, and all of a sudden this industry has appeared. But actually, there's people like yourselves that have actually been there, building these foundations so that we can genuinely support it now and move forward with it.
But it's only because now there's a reason. Beforehand, it was just, we had a lot of cheap gas. It was the path of least resistance, boiler breaks, new boiler, easy. People didn't need to get their head around
up until
anything.
This point, it's been a nice to have as opposed to a need to have. You know, and over the past couple of years, it's definitely become a need to have.
But it's needed. It's needed those foundations. It's need. You know, if you'd have woke up this morning and decided to set up Freedom, or as we did with Easy MCS, there wouldn't have been the experience, the learning, and the infrastructure there ready to support a mass deployment of installations and heat pumps. And we're not there. But I think that is something we'll be discussing in the next episode, because unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, folks. But before we go, we do have some exciting news to share. And back in April, we launched the Heatio Energy Challenge Group, which is a completely free to join community of consumers and experts that are on a renewable journey to become more sustainable. Together, they address the challenges in the energy industry and share their advice and experiences to help each other on their mission to save money on their energy bills. In association with Freedom Heat Pumps, and to celebrate our members, we'll be offering one lucky member of the group a chance to win a free heat pump installation worth up to £12,000. To enter this competition, just visit our social media channels, where you can find out all the details on how to become a member of the Energy Challenge Group. Good luck, and make sure you join us in the next episode, where we'll be discussing the barriers installers face in upskilling to heat pumps and how we can address the industry challenges installers experience.